Welcome back in, guys, to King Josiah TV, guys. Welcome into the live. Happy New Year to everybody, guys. But before we get into the episode, you guys know we're going to do our intro. Thank you guys for, again, welcome into King Josiah TV, where this channel was created to educate, promote, and influence the kingdom of Jesus Christ in this world. I am your host, Josiah, as an ambassador. Guys, before we get started, I need you to do me a huge favor. If you're listening on YouTube, go ahead and smash the subscribe button if you haven't already, and hit the like button if you're listening audibly on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Go ahead and give me that follow button, guys. Let's go ahead and roll right into today's show.
Watch giants fall like Goliath. David, I dance. This ain't no tick-tock. God told me that my steps was ordered. Walking in flip-flops. Chris Rock, how they laughed at me for...
All right. So first thing, guys, we're going to get into, guys, is Claressa Shields. Y'all know, let me say it again. Claressa Shields, like a tongue tire. We're going to talk about her initially. She recently just came out. She had a movie autobiography on her life that just came out. And she was interviewed by Andre Ward recently. A lot of you know I'm into boxing. I like watching that. It's one of my favorite pastimes to do. And so I was watching her interview with Andre Ward. It's like an hour or 2 hour interview, but she speaks about a section in this interview about when she went from amateur from the Olympics to becoming pro. And long story short, and I'm gonna let her explain, there was an issue between her deciding whether she was going to actually proceed forward in boxing because she was actually too young at the time, and as well leaning on God in that situation. I thought it just broke into a great talking point of God giving us favor in places where we don't deserve it. So I'm not going to talk it away. Let's go ahead and jump into it, guys. Today is going to be a long show, but guys, I've been gone, guys, since before Christmas. So we got a lot of stuff to cover, a lot of stuff to get into, but let's jump into the first one with Claressa.
For you, because I know they did. It wasn't you did the Olympics. Women weren't allowed to go to the Olympics.
Yep.
So when did you start realizing that, man, I can do it? Number one, and number two, I actually it's a thing. Is I can qualify. They saying we can go now
at age 13.
Okay.
So I didn't go to them until I was 17. But 13 when we got the newsletter that said 2012 will be including women in boxing for the first time at 112 pounds, 132 pounds, and 165. I told Jason, so we going to the Olympics at 132? Because I was only 135 back then. He's like, Reza, you are going to the Olympics at 165, so I'm never getting that big. He was like, trust me. It's going to be 165 in a few years. And all behold, a few years later, I was 158. So we getting ready for the Olympics at 165. The whole time from the age 13 till I was 16, we worked and worked and worked because we didn't know if I would be old enough yet to make it to the...
And guys, she's just about to get into a portion of the story that we're going to talk about. It's really going to open up something even bigger. Because yes, she wasn't old enough. She wasn't old enough. She wasn't big enough. But we're going to continue to drive this home, guys, because again, she's not old enough. Let's catch that. And she's not big enough. So she's underqualified to go after what she's going after.
The Olympics, as you know, being, because I wouldn't be 17 just yet. So we didn't know.
But you met the cutoff eventually, obviously.
I met the cutoff, but at first I was 6 months too young.
Okay. What happened?
God is what happened. Look, some stuff you can't even explain how it happened, but God did it. I won the silver gloves.
All you can claim is God. At the end of the day, guys, in everything we do, everything that happens, a lot of things happen. We can't describe how we got the favor, how things happen, how things went through. She said, but God.
At 16, the president of USA Boxing at that time said, Claressa, you're too young to go to this Olympics, which was 2012, the next year. He said, but don't get pregnant and don't have no kids.
That's what he said?
Yep. He said, and I'll see you at 2016. I was crushed. I was bummed. But guess who was there? Evander Holyfield. I went and sat with him and I said, hey, he's like, I watched your fight. You fight like a boy. You fight like a boy. I was like, oh, thank you. And he was like, so what you doing next? I'm like, I want to go to the Olympics, but I guess I'm too young. So I think I'm just going to quit boxing now. He was like, quit? I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do this for another 4 years. I got to make some money. Like, I got to take care of my family and stuff.
I don't think a lot of people know. A lot of people that maybe, if you follow boxing, you know this. This is without going being said, but Evander Holyfield, he was a Christian. He was saved throughout his entire career. He was outspoken about being a believer, even to this day. He was definitely very forward with his faith when it came to boxing, and it was just beautiful how he displayed God at the forefront of his entire career. So just wanted to put that in there. A little boxing history. If a lot of people didn't know the spiritual background of Evander Holyfield and why he's going to lead her into what she's led into next.
He said, don't quit. He was like, go home, pray about it. He was like, and don't turn pro. He said, when the Olympics, you can go to the Olympics 2016, but he said, I want you to pray about this though. I want you to quit. This was Evander Holyfield. And so
he's a heavyweight.
I went home, bummed about it, sad about it. And then I prayed too, like, God, I'm not asking you to give me a gift to Olympics. I'm telling you, let me earn it.
Opportunity. Yeah.
Let me get in the ring with these women so I can show them that ain't a number to number. So I'm like, let me just show them, God, just give me a chance. And I was praying about it. And then Jason called me one day when I was at school. He said, go and print out this paper. We got the Toledo Pal coming up. And I said, why are we going to that for? I can't qualify for the Olympics. It was the last qualifier. He said, print out the paper like I said. I said, okay. I printed it out and I'm reading it. And at first it was saying the first paper that we had, it said you had to be 17 by October 6, 2011. At that time, I was 16. I wasn't 17, so I was 6 months too young. This one said you have to be 17 by May 21st, 2012.
Okay.
I made the deadline by 2 months. My birthday was in March.
Yeah. Wow.
I said, ain't no way I'm reading this. I printed the paper out 10 times.
That's crazy. Everything just lined up perfectly. Ungranted favor.
Yeah. Just to make sure I wasn't tripping. I called Jason probably crying, like, so we can go to the Olympics. Like, gonna make it. He was like, we got to get ready for the PAL. Probably about like 6 weeks apart. I'm talking about, I probably ran through the whole school, probably crying and kept reading the paper. Like, ain't no way, this just happened to me. This is crazy.
How did they, I mean, I know you say it's God and I believe it. What made the IOC make that change like that?
The last Olympic qualifier, so they based it off the World Championships. Now they want it to be 17 by the World Championships. It wasn't that at first. They said you had to be 17 by October 6, 2011. I wasn't old enough. The president of USA Boxing told me.
He said 16.
2016, I see you.
So in May 2012, you go to the World Championship and you face Savannah Marshall. Did you know about Savannah Marshall before you got there?
Nope.
So guys, we're just using her story. We're gonna pause her story there, guys. It's like almost a 2-hour interview with her and Andrew Ward. But as you can see, what she's describing is she got ungranted favor in a situation where she shouldn't have had the favor. Guys, so when I was listening to her story and listening to what she was talking about, the only thing I could think of, the biggest thing that came to my mind was the story of Esther in the Bible. I don't know if a lot of you have read the story of Esther in the Bible. It's about 10 chapters in the Bible. It's a short little book, but I'm going to give you a quick synopsis of that. And then we're going to break that down a little bit, guys, because pretty much what Claressa Shields went through, I thought was similar in parallel. Because if you look back at Esther in the Bible, she was a Jew. She was an orphan Jew that became queen of Persia. I believe back in that time where she was pretty much an orphan. Mordecai was her pretty much her adopted or stepfather at the time, and she got put into the king's house. All the virgins, she got picked of them, got favor in that, and the king found her to be the most beautiful and the most attractive at that time, and she became queen, and she was a Jew. And being a Jew at that time, and in this section, this was just after Moses and that whole situation, there wasn't a lot of love and admiration for or favor of Jews. They were still kind of the downtrodden, the lower ones. So she gets favor from the king, and is in the king's house. She keeps her identity concealed that she's a Jew. And there comes a time and point in there where, actually, let's just read the first part of it. from Esther 2. Now Esther was in winning favor in the eyes of who saw her. And this is verse 16. And when Esther was taken to the king, Ahasuerus, into the holy place, into the holy palace, the king loved Esther more than all the women, and she won grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti, which was the prior queen that defiled the king at the time, or defied him at the time. And so they wanted to find a more suitable queen for him, for the king at the time. But at this time, again, there was a lot of strife between the Jews and the powers that be of Persia at that time. And so the king, after she became queen, Mordecai, at the time, pretty much did something in her family. This kind of leads into the story that, again, God was working on the back scene of Esther's life and Esther's story. So I'm gonna just read this. This is from verse 20. Again, this is from Esther 2 as well. Esther had not made known of her kindred of her people, as I told you guys. Mordecai had commanded her from Esther to obey, to be obeyed, Mordecai, just as when she was brought up by him. In those days, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Bethan and Teshra, two of the king's I think they're like concubines or people that were just like working in his palace, who granted the threshold, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Ashtash, which is the king at the time, which is Esther, who she was queen with, and came to knowledge of Mordecai, and he told it to Queen Esther, and Esther told him in the name of Mordecai. So what that was pretty much saying was there was two men that were plotting against the king at the time. They were plotting to kill him. And so later in the story, you have Haman. He's a leader of the Amorites, and he plot to slaughter all the Jews. Mordecai had became the focal point of Haman's plans. And before this, again, we just said that Esther went to the king and told him, this is earlier in the storyline, told him that Mordecai had seen these two men that were plotting against him, which saved the king's life at that time. And again, Haman, he made Mordecai a focal point of his issue, and he reaches. So Mordecai reaches out to a fellow Jew, Esther, who became unmarried, who had unmerited favor with the king now. Esther at the time does not see God's favor on her life, as her father requests her to plead the mercy from the king of the Jews, because Haman at the time was trying to kill all the Jews. He put out a decree he was going to kill them because they did not bow to the king, that they were pretty much pushing up against the king at that time, and which Christians have always been positioned like that, because we don't fall in line with worshiping certain things or following certain things that the world wants us to follow. We become an enemy of the world, because no one entered the king's courts without facing death, even her. When Mordecai asked her to plead for the mercy, she goes into a deep fasting and praying, and in disbelief she will live after making this wild request of the king. Once again, she was granted favor and access, and enters the king's courts, and he welcomes her. And she welcomes her, and again, she's walking in there thinking that she's not going to grant favor. She's thinking she's more than likely going to die, because no one can enter the king's gates. Again, and blessed her and the Jews and the enemies of the Jews. Haman was hung later in the story, and his whole family and descendants were taken out. So what point am I driving here home with Esther's story? Esther was granted favor in a time frame where she was of the wrong nationality. Claressa Shields was of the wrong age group. And she was also not qualified at that time, just like Claressa Shields was not qualified at that time. But God was working in the back scenes of her story, and allowed her to become put in a place of power to free all the Jews at that time, and as well bring glory and power to her people. So in this story, it shows us that, guys, God's going to grant you favor in places that you never thought you could get favor. He's going to put you in places where you were not qualified, But you've got to just put all your faith and your trust and your belief in God that he can bring you through. And in doing that, and goes again to a verse I want to pick here from Proverbs 3:5-6. In all your ways, acknowledge him, acknowledge God in everything you do, and he will make your path straight. So if we can honor God in everything that we do, if we can put God first in everything that we do, God will work things out and give us favor in places that we don't deserve it. God will put us in places that we may not even be qualified for, but God's got his plan that he's working through for our good, in the spite of our enemies or people that are against us. Watching the King Josiah TV podcast. If you're listening audibly on Apple Podcasts, go ahead and hit the follow button. If you're listening on YouTube, go ahead and hit me the subscribe. Thank you guys for listening. I will see you guys again next week.
My salvation on me like it's a helmet. The way you to sin is death, for send you to hell quick. Wanted to be all about me, God, I was selfish. I was rebellious.